Welcome into NFL Total Access. I'm Omar Reese. Hope you had a great holiday weekend. Happy to tell you the fun's not over. Let's talk some football for the next hour or so. Our experts will let you know which new coordinators ought to have the most impact this season. Plus, we'll tell you what a couple of Aaron Rodgers overtime playoff losses have to do with the NBA Finals. However, in case you missed it, think you've heard a lot of Cowboy talk this offseason? Well, we're just getting warmed up. For the third time, the Cowboys will be featured on Hard Knocks. They missed the playoffs each of the last two times they were on it, but after last year's 6-10 season, pressure's on in 2021. David Carr, Steve Weich, and Tom Pelissero joining us now. David, we'll start with you. What behind-the-scenes storyline are you most eager to see with this year's Cowboys?
I'm just excited to see Dak back on the field. I want to see how he just negotiates that locker room, negotiates the conversations with Mike McCarthy. That stuff's always really interesting to me, obviously playing that position. But I think that just the faith that they showed in him coming back from his injury, even though he was hurt early in the season, to pay him, to make him the franchise quarterback, Mike McCarthy clearly saw enough in those first couple games where they were literally putting up PlayStation, Xbox type numbers, you know, in that early part of the season. He's the guy. It's not going through Zeke. Mike McCarthy wants to throw the football. I want to see how that interaction happens and how they push this thing forward and try and get in the playoffs, try and do something.
Well, David, the big issue for the Cowboys was the defense, and I'm really interested in seeing Trayvon Diggs, the second-year cornerback, who really was a standout as a rookie before he injured his foot. He only played in 12 games, but he had a forced fumble, 3 interceptions, 14 pass breakups. And speaking to somebody down there watching him in OTAs and minicamps, they say he is a ball hawk. And once he understands what Dan Quinn, the new DC, wants in this scheme, he could be a perfect fit. Now, we've seen some quarterbacks like Richard Sherman excel in the scheme, but pass pressure up front was a key, and maybe they can get that out of a safety who came with Dan Quinn from Atlanta to Dallas, Keanu Neal, who now is going to be playing linebacker. That's another storyline I'm looking at. But again, Trayvon Diggs, Stephon Diggs' younger brother, a really good player and how he develops in this scheme.
Well, Steve, let's also talk about the corner opposite Diggs, and that is rookie second-round draft pick Kelvin Joseph, a.k.a. rapper YKDV, Boss Man Fat. There is always a Hard Knocks musical element, right? But this guy is actually legit, and he's got the opportunity to be a shutdown type of cornerback in the NFL if he can put aside some of the things that led to his dismissal off the field from LSU. For now, Joseph says it is strictly business. And if you're wondering, yes, he does have an album called Strictly Business. The other guy I've got my eye on in Cowboys camp, wide receiver Michael Gallup, who they are cross-training at a bunch of different spots. You'll see him playing some flanker this season. You'll see him playing some in the slot. We talked so much about Amari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb. Maybe Gallup is the breakout star of this offense in 2021.
Shout out, Tom, for getting Calvin Joseph's stage name on flawlessly. You heard David mention the relationship between Dak Prescott and Mike McCarthy play out behind the scenes, something he wants to see in this Hard Knocks. The last time we were given this sort of behind-the-scenes access to Mike McCarthy, it was with you up at his property in Green Bay. He assembled that pseudo-coaching staff. They were studying different elements of the game as they prepared to return to the sidelines. Well, obviously, 2020, nobody could have predicted the pandemic and everything that McCarthy had to coach through during his return. How do you think the lessons he learned last year might help him apply to the 2021 season?
Well, Omar, one important lesson that Mike McCarthy learned was don't try to do too much and change too much on defense. It was a unique offseason in 2020 in that there really wasn't an offseason on the field. They made significant schematic changes. Players spoke openly about the defense being too complicated. So what do they do in this offseason? They bring in Dan Quinn to replace Mike Nolan, a guy who runs a variation of the same system that Dallas has run in the past. It is certainly going to be simplified. They get a lot of energy with him coming into into the building, too. As for actually having Hard Knocks in the building, I'm not sure that sitting down with me for a couple of days is going to help you with any of that. If I know Mike McCarthy, he would rather have his full focus on just winning games, but don't be surprised if McCarthy shows a little bit more personality on Hard Knocks than people are expecting.
Well, you'll be able to see it all beginning on August 10th on Hard Knocks. Dallas Cowboys on HBO and streaming on HBO Max. And that leads us to last year's standings in the NFC East. Clearly the worst division in football. Washington won it with that 7-9 record. And each team coming into this year with significant questions at quarterback. From Dak's injury to Daniel Jones's growth, to the inexperience of Jalen Hurts, to the experience of changing teams, and Ryan Fitzpatrick. For more on this NFC East, let's welcome in our Kimberly Jones now. Kim, David, and Tom rejoining us. David, we'll start with you once again. Which storyline in the NFC East are you looking forward to most as training camp approaches?
Well, this division is interesting, for me. I'm partial to the Giants, and I want to see how Daniel Jones kind of comes into his own, and it really helps this football team. Washington is interesting with Ryan Fitzpatrick and the guys that they've brought over there. But when I look at it, I look at Jalen Hurts, because this is a guy that has not really had a full offseason, and now he's the guy in Philadelphia. And when he went in, their run game, for maybe everything didn't improve, but the run game was much better. And you think about when Doug Peterson, when those guys had success and they went on their run a couple years ago, they were running the football in the top part of the league. So if they can take this offseason, help Jalen understand what's going on from an offensive standpoint, what he wants to do, throwing the football down the field, that run game is going to be good. It's going to be there. Those RPOs are going to be back. Remember that term? We threw RPO around like it was crazy when those guys were doing it back in the day. And now I think they have a chance with this offseason to do some of that with Jalen. And I'm excited to see what he does in this offense.
David, I'm gonna pick a guy who's gonna be chasing Jalen Hurts, and that's Chase Young of the Washington football team. Last year, Defensive Rookie of the Year. He played very well in many games, 7.5 sacks, 4 forced fumbles. I was on a Zoom last year where I remember Chase telling the media that his mom kept asking him, where are the sacks? Mom loves sacks. And he said, I don't think she knows how hard they are to come by. Well, my guess would be Chase Young will have more than 7.5 this season, as that defensive front for Washington is so strong. My other guess, he might tackle Saquon Barkley, something he didn't do last year because of Saquon's injury. And Omar and David, when you talk about Daniel Jones's growth, that guy right there, I would argue, could help his growth, Daniel Jones's that is, as much as anyone. And that, of course, would be a healthy Saquon Barkley.
Kim, I'm interested to see how the Washington offense develops in the second year in Scott Turner's scheme. We have already seen Turner show he is a very creative offensive mind. He is not scared to pull plays from anywhere. You mentioned, David, that they bring in Ryan Fitzpatrick, who certainly seems to be in line to be their week 1 starting quarterback. They also signed wide receiver Curtis Samuel, kind of a chess piece type of guy that when you get creative on offense, there's different ways to manufacture touches for him. They also bring in Adam Humphries, who's been a very good slot receiver when he's been healthy in the past. Throw on top of that guys like Logan Thomas and Antonio Gibson. 1 year of being comfortable in the scheme. In Thomas's case, 1 more year being comfortable in the position. There's no reason for Washington to think that this offense shouldn't take a step in year 2.
As well as Alex Smith played last year, leading them to that 5-1 record when he started. Statistically, Ryan Fitzpatrick, in and out of the lineup in Miami, had a much better season, so they can get him and then some to establish that in Washington. Look out, especially with that defense. Thank you all. Still to come on NFL Total Access, from a rookie wide receiver trying to make a reputation to a veteran quarterback trying to fix a reputation. We're talking NFL players